The warning klaxons of Research Station Kepler 442b screamed their mechanical panic across the sterile corridors as Zara Khan, xenological communication specialist, sprinted through the emergency-lit passages. Her magnetic boots clanged against the metal flooring, each step echoing the urgency that had consumed the station for the past 6 hours. In her arms, she cradled a makeshift containment unit, little more than a modified atmospheric processor housing wrapped in thermal blankets. Khan to command. She gasped into her cum unit, dodging around a corner where emergency crews were sealing a hull breach. I'm almost to Lab 7. The specimen is stable, but we're running out of time. The voice that crackled back through the static belonged to Station Commander Torres, and it carried the weight of impossible decisions. Zara, the evacuation ships are loading now. You have maybe 20 minutes before we have to abandon station. The Hegemony fleet will be here soon, and if they find what we've discovered, Zara didn't need him to finish. The Galactic Hegemony had very specific policies about unregistered bioforms, especially ones that might challenge their carefully maintained ecosystem of control. What they'd found in the depths of this system's asteroid field wasn't just another alien species. It was something that could reshape everything they knew about interspecies relationships. She burst through the doors of Lab 7, her breathing ragged. The main containment facility had been damaged in the initial attack, forcing her to improvise. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the walls, lined with shattered specimen containers and scattered research equipment. But at the center of it all, in a hastily rigged life support chamber, was their discovery. The creature was roughly the size of a house cat, but that's where any earthly comparison ended. Its body seemed to shift between states, sometimes appearing almost crystalline, other times looking like living liquid mercury. 6 appendages that might generously be called legs moved in patterns that suggested intelligence, while sensory organs that pulsed with bioluminescent colors tracked her movement. Most remarkably, it had begun to mimic the rhythmic patterns of human heartbeats whenever researchers were present. "Hey there, little one," Zara whispered, her voice automatically dropping into the soft, nurturing tone she discovered the creature responded to best. "We're going to get you out of here, okay?" The creature's bioluminescent patches flickered in what their preliminary analysis suggested might be a response. 3 weeks of study had revealed something extraordinary. This being appeared to form emotional bonds not just with its own species, but with any sentient creature it encountered. The Hegemony's preliminary reports had classified it as a universal symbiont, but Zara knew better. This wasn't parasitism or manipulation. It was something far more profound. A new alarm began blaring, this one indicating incoming ships. Zara's hands flew over the makeshift controls, adjusting the portable life support parameters. The creature needed a specific atmospheric mixture the human technology could provide, but barely. One wrong calculation, and their discovery would die before they could understand what it meant. "Khan," Commander Torres's voice exploded through the comm. "Hegemony advanced scouts just dropped out of hyperspace. Whatever you're doing, do it now." Zara looked at the creature, its shifting form somehow managing to convey what she could only interpret as trust. In 3 weeks, it had bonded with every member of the research team, but most strongly with her. Dr. Martinez had theorized that it was responding to her role as primary caregiver, but Zara suspected something deeper. The creature seemed to understand that humans formed emotional connections differently than other known species. "I'm not leaving you," she told it, her decision crystallizing. The evacuation protocols were clear: no biological samples were to fall into Hegemony hands. The official policy was sterilization, but Zara Khan hadn't become a xenological specialist to follow policies that meant destroying potentially the most important discovery in galactic history. She began disconnecting the creature's containment system from the station's power grid, switching it to portable units. The being's color patterns shifted to what she'd learned indicated distress, but it remained calm, trusting her to know what she was doing. The first explosion rocked the station as Hegemony weapons began their preliminary sanitization. Zara stumbled but maintained her grip on the containment unit. Emergency power flickered, and for a terrifying moment, the creature's life support wavered. Come on, she muttered, rerouting power through her personal equipment. Her xenological suit's battery was designed to last 48 hours, She was about to find out if that would be enough dot through the lab's observation windows. She could see the evacuation shuttles launching, their engines bright against the star field. Part of her wanted to run, to follow protocol, to live to study other creatures another day. But as she looked down at the being that had somehow learned to purr in response to human presence, she knew she couldn't abandon it. Zara Khan to any human vessel. She broadcast on an open channel. I'm remaining on station with a xenobiological specimen. Do not attempt rescue. Repeat, do not risk yourselves for me. The creature's appendages reached out, touching the transparent aluminum of its container where her hand rested. The connection was electric, not literally, but emotionally. In that moment, Zara understood what the creature was offering. Not dependency or parasitism, but partnership. Mutual care across species lines that the rigid hegemony could never comprehend. All right, little friend, she said, securing the portable unit to her equipment harness. Let's show them what human stubbornness looks like. As Kepler Station shuddered under increasing bombardment, Zara Khan made her way toward the emergency pods. She had a plan desperate, probably suicidal, but entirely human in its optimistic determination. She was going to save her new companion, and maybe, just maybe, change how the galaxy thought about the bonds between species. The creature's bioluminescent patterns pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, and Zara couldn't help but smile. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. The escape pod determination tumbled through space like a metallic seed cast into an infinite garden, its hull scarred from the debris field that had once been Research Station Kepler 442b. Inside, Zara Khan fought against the nauseating spin while monitoring the life support readings for both herself and her unusual passenger. 18 hours had passed since their desperate launch, and their situation had evolved from desperate to impossible. Emergency beacon status? She asked the pod's basic AI, though she already knew the answer. Beacon offline. Hull breach in section. C compromised the primary transmitter array. Estimated range of backup transmitter, 47,000 kilometers. In a galaxy measured in light years, 47,000 kilometers might as well have been shouting into the void. Zara adjusted the atmospheric mix in the creature's containment unit, noting that her companion she'd begun thinking of it as Echo, for its remarkable ability to mirror emotional states, was maintaining stable readings. Despite their circumstances, Echo's crystalline liquid form had adapted remarkably to the confined space. What had once required a room-sized containment system now seemed comfortable in a housing the size of a large briefcase. The creature had somehow compressed its own form while maintaining all vital functions. More remarkably, its bioluminescent patterns had shifted to emit a soft, steady glow that conserved energy while providing a strangely comforting presence in the pod's cramped interior. The pod's environmental systems chose that moment to remind her of their precarious situation. A soft chime indicated another system failure. This time, the protein synthesizer. Zara's food supplies had just dropped from inadequate to critical. Life support analysis, she requested. Current consumption rates. Oxygen reserves sufficient for 42 hours. Power reserves sufficient for 36 hours. Recommendation: reduce all non-essential systems to extend operational window. Zara looked at Echo's containment unit, which was currently drawing 23% of their total power. Non-essential. The AI didn't understand that some things transcended mathematical optimization. Maintain current power allocation to xenobiological life support, she commanded. Warning, this allocation reduces human survival probability by 18%. Acknowledged. Maintain allocation. Echo's patterns shifted to what Zara had learned. Indicated curiosity, maybe even concern. The creature had begun responding not just to her emotional state, but to the nuances of her decision-making process. It seemed to understand that she was choosing its welfare over her own optimal survival chances. Don't worry about me, Zara told it, pressing her palm against the containment unit's surface. We humans have a saying, in for a penny, in for a pound, which basically means once we decide to care about something, we go all the way. The pod's communication array suddenly crackled to life with an automated transmission. Zara's heart leaped until she realized it wasn't a rescue signal. It was a hegemony broadcast on a general frequency. All vessels in the Kepler system are advised that a biological contaminant may have escaped the sanitization of Research Station 442B. Any ship detecting unusual energy signatures or unregistered life signs is required to report immediately to Hegemony Command. The organism in question poses a severe threat to galactic biosecurity. Zara switched off the transmission. Biosecurity threat, she muttered. They really don't get it, do they, Echo? Her companion's response was to shift its coloration to match the soft blue-white of her suit's status lights. The gesture was subtle, but unmistakable. Echo was trying to comfort her. The creature that the Hegemony considered a contamination risk was displaying emotional intelligence that surpassed many supposedly advanced species. New problem announced itself through the pod's systems. Gravitational anomaly detected. Zara checked their trajectory and felt her stomach drop. They were being pulled toward a rogue asteroid, one large enough to have its own weak gravity, well, but small enough that their orbital mechanics would end in a collision rather than stable orbit. Time to impact? At current trajectory, 14 hours, 17 minutes. Zara ran calculations through her head. The pod's maneuvering thrusters had enough fuel for maybe 30 minutes of directional control. Used properly, she could alter their trajectory enough to avoid the asteroid. Used improperly, she'd strand them in an even more remote section of space. But as she studied the sensor readings, something caught her attention. The asteroid wasn't just a rock. It was showing thermal signatures consistent with artificial structures. Someone or something had built facilities inside the asteroid. Echo, what do you make of this? She showed the readings to her companion. Having learned that the creature was remarkably good at pattern recognition, Echo's form brightened, and its appendages moved in what Zara had come to recognize as excited interest. More intriguingly, the creature began emitting a low-frequency pulse that seemed to resonate with something in the asteroid's readings. Are you trying to communicate with something in there? Echo's response was unmistakable confirmation. The creature had detected something in the asteroid that its enhanced senses could perceive, but human instruments couldn't clearly identify. Zara faced her next impossible decision. Use the thrusters to avoid the asteroid and continue drifting toward almost certain death, or trust in her companion's instincts and guide them toward the unknown installation. She'd spent her career studying alien behavior patterns, but she'd never encountered anything like Echo's emotional intelligence. The creature didn't just form bonds, it seemed to understand the deeper implications of those bonds. If it thought the asteroid held promise, maybe it was detecting something her instruments couldn't measure. All right, partner, Zara said, adjusting their trajectory toward the asteroid rather than away from it. I'm trusting your judgment here, but if this is some kind of alien creature instinct to return to the nest or something, we're going to have a very short conversation about communication protocols. Echo's patterns shifted to what she could only interpret as amusement. The creature had developed what appeared to be a sense of humor, responding to human sarcasm with its own form of playful luminescence. As they approached the asteroid, Zara detected something that made her breath catch. Breathable atmosphere leaking from what appeared to be an airlock. The facility wasn't just artificial, it was potentially habitable. Proximity alert, the pod's AI announced, detecting electromagnetic signatures consistent with active technology. Power sources online. Atmospheric readings indicate oxygen-nitrogen mix suitable for human habitation. Any signs of current inhabitants? Negative. Technology appears to be automated systems only. Zara made her final decision. She was going to dock with the asteroid facility, trust her life to whatever they found inside, and hope that Echo's instincts were better than her own survival calculations. As the pod's magnetic clamps engaged with the asteroid's docking port, Zara realized she was no longer just trying to survive. She was about to discover whether the bond between human and alien could guide them to safety, or if she'd just chosen a more interesting way to die. Echo's patterns pulsed with something that looked remarkably like anticipation. The airlock of the asteroid facility opened with a pneumatic hiss that spoke of advanced engineering and meticulous maintenance. Zara Khan stepped through the threshold, carrying Echo's containment unit, her xenological suit reading atmospheric conditions that seemed almost too good to be true. Perfect pressure, ideal temperature, oxygen levels optimal for human habitation. This doesn't make sense, she whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the surprisingly spacious corridor beyond. The walls were lined with a material that seemed to shift between metal and something organic, pulsing very faintly with bioluminescent veins that reminded her immediately of Echo's own coloration patterns. Echo had become increasingly active. As they'd entered the facility, the creature's form pressed against its containment unit, appendages moving in complex patterns, while its bioluminescent display had intensified to levels Zara had never observed before. Most remarkably, the facility's walls were beginning to respond to Echo's presence, their own faint luminescence brightening and shifting to match her companion's patterns. My God, Zara breathed, understanding flooding through her. This place, it was built by your species, wasn't it? Echo's confirmation was so intense that the entire corridor flared with synchronized bioluminescence, as if the facility itself was awakening to welcome home a long-lost child. Zara moved deeper into the installation, guided by both her scientific instincts and Echo's increasingly excited responses. The architecture was unlike anything in her xenological database spaces. They flowed organically from one to another, surfaces that provided exactly the right amount of illumination as she approached. Atmospheric controls, it seemed to anticipate her needs before her suit's sensors could register them. She entered what appeared to be a central chamber, and her breath caught. The room was enormous, its ceiling disappearing into darkness above. But what captured her attention was the collection of containment systems arranged throughout the space. Dozens of them, each designed for different atmospheric requirements, different gravity orientations, different environmental needs. This is a sanctuary, she realized. Your people built a refuge for other species. As if responding to her words, the chamber systems came online. Holographic displays materialized, showing information in scripts and languages Zara couldn't read. But the visual elements were unmistakable. Star charts, biological schematics, what appeared to be care instructions for hundreds of different species. Echo was practically vibrating with excitement now, its form shifting through states Zara had never seen before. The creature extended several appendages toward the chamber's controls, and remarkably, the systems responded. The holographic displays shifted, reorganizing themselves until they showed information that a human mind could begin to process. You're translating for me, Zara said in amazement. The facility's central AI, if it could be called that, spoke in a voice that seemed to be composed of harmonized tones from dozens of different species. Welcome, caretaker, it said, the words somehow appearing in her mind as much as through her suit's audio systems. We have waited long for the arrival of the bonding ones. Bonding ones? Echo's containment unit had begun to resonate with the facility's systems. Zara realized that her companion was communicating directly with the installation's consciousness, sharing information at speeds far beyond which she could follow. The species designation your companion represents translates imprecisely to your language. They are those who form the universal bond, the bridge between all thinking beings. Your species was ... anticipated. Zara felt a chill of recognition. You knew humans would find Echo's species? Not knew, hoped. The bonding ones develop symbiotic relationships only with species that demonstrate certain characteristics. Your species exhibited the necessary compatibility markers. The holographic displays shifted again, showing what appeared to be observational data on human behavior, rescue missions, pet adoption rates, interspecies communication attempts, even human relationships with artificial intelligences and robotic companions. You've been studying us. The bonding ones have been studying you. They form partnerships only with species that demonstrate what you might call universal care, the tendency to form emotional bonds across biological boundaries. Most species limit their care to their own kind. Humans extend care to any creature they perceive as requiring it. Zara looked at Echo's containment unit, understanding beginning to dawn. That's why Echo bonded with our research team so quickly. We were exactly what it was looking for, a species that would adopt it. Your companion has been seeking a compatible species for what you would measure as several standard years. The destruction of the research station was ... unfortunate timing. The facility's systems began to adjust the containment unit's parameters, and Zara watched in amazement as Echo's chamber began to expand and modify itself. creating an environment that was simultaneously suitable for the creature's needs and accessible to human interaction. The facility is adapting, she realized, as it was designed to do. The Bonding Ones created these sanctuaries throughout the galaxy to serve as meeting places between compatible species. Each facility learns and adapts based on the needs of its inhabitants. But even as Zara marveled at the technology and the implications of what she was learning, new alarms began to sound. The facility's external sensors were detecting approaching ships, and the energy signatures were unmistakably Hegemony military. They followed us, Zara said, feeling the weight of her decision to bring Echo here. The Hegemony considers the Bonding Ones a threat to their systems of control, the facility's AI confirmed. Emotional bonds between species complicate their administrative categories. Zara looked at Echo, whose patterns had shifted to what she now recognized as determination rather than fear. Her companion was trying to tell her something important. What is it, Echo? The creature's response came through the facility's translation systems. Protect, bond, fight if necessary. Zara felt a surge of fierce protectiveness that surprised her with its intensity. In just a few days, this creature had become more than a research subject or even a companion. Echo had become family in the deepest sense that humans understood the concept. How long until they arrive? She asked the facility. Approximately 47 minutes. However, the installation possesses defensive capabilities that may prove adequate. Through the chamber's transparent walls, Zara could see weapon systems emerging from the asteroid's surface, technology that looked far more advanced than anything the Hegemony deployed. What do you need from me? She asked. The facility's response was immediate. Partnership. The defensive systems require coordination between human intuition, bonding one emotional intelligence, and our technological capabilities. Together, we may preserve this sanctuary. Zara placed her hand on Echo's container, feeling the creature's appendages press against the barrier to meet her touch. Then that's what we'll do, all of us together. The asteroid facility began its transformation from sanctuary to fortress. But what struck Zara most was that it was becoming something entirely new, a place where three different forms of intelligence could work as one: human, alien, and artificial, bonded by choice rather than protocol. Echo's patterns shifted to what Zara now knew represented absolute trust and determination. They were about to face their first real test as partners. A Hegemony battlecruiser, Dominance Absolute, dropped out of hyperspace like a predator scenting wounded prey. Its sleek, utilitarian design spoke of efficiency over elegance, function over beauty. Everything about it screamed institutional control. Captain Vex Corthane, a Hegemony officer whose species had traded emotional complexity for administrative precision eons ago, reviewed the asteroid's scanning results with typical Hegemony dispassion. Confirmed biological contamination signature. He commanded his tactical officer. Confirmed, Captain. The universal symbiont signature is definitely present within the asteroid installation. Additionally, we're detecting one human life sign. Human. Corthane's species had particular disdain for humans. Their chaotic emotional responses and tendency toward irrational decision-making made them difficult to categorize in Hegemony databases. Probably the research station survivor mentioned in the alerts. Have they responded to our hails? No response to standard Hegemony frequencies, Captain. Then they're either dead or deliberately ignoring lawful authority. Either way, we proceed with sterilization protocols. Begin charging the plasma bombardment array. Inside the asteroid, Zara Khan was learning that her new home was far more than a sanctuary. It was a masterpiece of defensive engineering that anticipated threats while prioritizing the protection of life over the destruction of enemies. Incoming. Transmission from the Hegemony vessel. The Facility A, I announced. Standard surrender demand. They require immediate transfer of all biological specimens and human personnel. Zara looked at Echo, whose containment system had now merged seamlessly with the facility's central command interface. Her companion was connected directly to the asteroid's consciousness, and through their bond, she could feel the creature's absolute determination to protect their sanctuary. What are our options? She asked. Multiple approaches available, the AI responded. However, optimal outcomes require coordination between human tactical thinking. Bonding one empathic manipulation and facility defensive systems. Echo's patterns pulsed with something that felt like excitement mixed with fierce protectiveness. Through the facility's translation matrix, Zara received her companion's communication. Show them bonds stronger than weapons. The bonding ones do not typically engage in combat, the AI explained. However, they excel at creating emotional connections that transcend species barriers. Even hegemony officers, despite their psychological conditioning, retain some capacity for emotional bonding. Zara felt a spark of understanding. You want to convert them? Not convert. Connect. The hegemony's greatest weakness is their suppression of interspecies emotional bonds. What they view as contamination, we can demonstrate as strength. The asteroid's defensive systems were unlike anything Zara had studied. Instead of conventional weapons, the installation deployed what could only be described as empathy amplifiers, technologies that enhanced and broadcast the emotional resonance between bonded beings. Captain Corthane, she said, opening a communication channel to the hegemony ship. This is Dr. Zara Khan, Xenological Communication Specialist. I'm requesting parley under Galactic Protocol 7. The response was immediate and predictably bureaucratic. Dr. Khan, you are harboring a biological contaminant classified as a Class A threat to galactic biosecurity. Surrender the organism immediately or face the consequences of resisting lawful hegemony authority. Captain, before you make any irreversible decisions, I'd like to show you something. Will you accept a data transmission? Zara could almost hear the hegemony officer's internal conflict. Curiosity versus protocol. Efficiency versus thoroughness. After a moment, transmission accepted. But any attempt at digital warfare will result in immediate bombardment. Working through the facility's systems and guided by Echo's emotional intelligence, Zara compiled something unprecedented, a comprehensive data package that wasn't just information, but actual emotional experience. Using the bonding one's unique abilities, she created a transmission that would let the hegemony crew experience firsthand what interspecies bonding actually felt like. The package contained her memories of first meeting Echo, the gradual development of trust, the moment of mutual recognition and care, and most importantly, the sense of completeness that came from partnership across species lines. But more than memories, the transmission carried the actual emotional resonance, the feeling of being part of something larger than oneself. Transmitting now, she said, and watched through the asteroid's sensors as the data package was received by the hegemony ship. The response was immediate and unexpected. Throughout the battle cruiser, crew members began experiencing something their conditioning had suppressed for generations: the pure, undiluted joy of emotional connection. For the first time in their lives, many of them felt what it was like to truly care about another being. Not out of duty or protocol, but out of choice and affection. Captain Corthane's voice, when it came through the CUM system again, carried a tremor that spoke of a mind encountering concepts it had never been allowed to process. What did you transmit to us? The experience of bonding, Captain. What your protocols classify as contamination, we know as partnership. The creature you're here to destroy isn't a threat. It's a bridge between all thinking species. Through the facility's sensors, Zara could see the hegemony ship's tactical systems powering down. The crew was experiencing something they'd never been trained to handle: doubt about their mission's righteousness. Echo's patterns had shifted to something Zara had never seen before, not excitement or determination, but something that could only be described as hope. The creature was sensing the emotional awakening happening throughout the hegemony crew. Captain, Zara continued, your people have spent so long categorizing and controlling other species that you've forgotten what it feels like to simply care about them. What if there was another way? What if instead of managing the galaxy through fear and regulation, we could connect it through understanding and empathy? The response took longer this time. When Corthane's voice returned, it was different, more hesitant, more genuinely curious. Dr. Khan, some of my crew are reporting unusual ... sensations, feelings they can't classify or control. Our medical officer suggests we may have been exposed to some form of mental contamination. Not contamination, Captain. Liberation. You're feeling what every other species in the galaxy experiences naturally: the capacity to form bonds across species lines. Your protocols may call it weakness, but it's actually the greatest strength any civilization can have. Through the asteroid systems, Zara could see crew members throughout the hegemony ship abandoning their posts to seek out fellow crew members, not for orders or reports, but simply for the comfort of connection. The transmission had awakened, something that their conditioning couldn't entirely suppress. Echo's communication came through clearly. They understand now. The bond is stronger than fear. Captain Corthane, Zara said, I'm extending an invitation. Come aboard our facility. Meet Echo in person. Experience what real partnership between species can accomplish. If after that you still believe we're a threat, we won't resist your decision. The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, Dr. Khan, against every regulation and protocol I've ever sworn to uphold ... we're docking. I need to understand what you've done to us. Zara smiled, looking at Echo, whose patterns were now pulsing with what could only be called joy. What we've done, Captain, is show you what it means to be part of a family that spans the stars. The Hegemony battlecruiser changed course, approaching the asteroid not as conquerors, but as beings seeking to understand something they'd never been allowed to experience. The simple, profound bond between different forms of life choosing to care for each other. Captain Vex Corthane stepped through the asteroid facility's airlock with the careful precision of a being encountering something completely outside his experiential parameters. His neural conditioning had prepared him for thousands of potential scenarios: combat, negotiation, investigation, even first contact protocols. But nothing in his training had prepared him for the emotional resonance he'd experienced from Dr. Khan's transmission, or the way his crew had begun seeking physical comfort from each other. Behavior pattern that had been systematically discouraged. Throughout Hegemony space, the facility's adaptation to Hegemony physiology was immediate and seamless. Atmospheric pressure adjusted to accommodate Corthane's respiratory needs. Lighting shifted to frequencies that his optical organs processed optimally, and the floor provided exactly the right amount of magnetic traction for his species' natural gait. But more than physical accommodation, the installation seemed to emanate a sense of welcome that bypassed his psychological conditioning entirely. Captain Corthane, Zara Khan approached, carrying what appeared to be a portable containment unit. Thank you for coming. I know this violates every protocol you've ever learned. Dr. Khan, Corthane's vocal apparatus struggled with the concept of uncertainty. My crew is behaving in ways that our behavioral analysts cannot explain. They are seeking unnecessary physical proximity, expressing concern for each other's welfare beyond operational requirements. And several have reported what they describe as caring feelings toward species they've never encountered before. Zara smiled an expression that Corthane found himself analyzing not as a potential threat indicator, but as a communication of genuine pleasure at his presence. Captain, what you're describing isn't contamination, it's empathy, the natural capacity to form emotional connections across species boundaries. She gestured toward the containment unit she carried. I'd like you to meet Echo. The moment Corthane's attention focused on the creature within the unit, several impossible things happened simultaneously. His enhanced combat reflexes, designed to identify threats instantly, registered the organism as completely non-threatening. His administrative assessment protocols, programmed to categorize all life forms within established parameters, found no applicable classifications. And most disturbing of all, he experienced what could only be described as curiosity, not the analytical data-gathering drive that his conditioning approved, but genuine interest in the creature's welfare. Echo's response was immediate and remarkable. The creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted to frequencies that somehow harmonized with Corthane's own neural activity, creating a resonance that the captain could feel at a level deeper than conscious thought. For the first time in his adult life, Vex Corthane experienced what humans called wonder. It's beautiful, he said, and immediately felt alarmed at his own word choice. Aesthetic appreciation was not a conditioned hegemony response. Echo responds to emotional authenticity, Zara explained. Your species may have suppressed their capacity for bonding, but it was never completely eliminated. Echo can sense the potential for connection and works to nurture it through the facility's communication systems. Echo's message reached Corthane in a way that bypassed language entirely. Welcome, safe, family. The concept of family as applied to beings from different species, should have been incomprehensible to Corthane's conditioning. Instead, he found himself understanding it with perfect clarity. Family wasn't defined by genetic similarity or administrative classification. It was created through choice, care, and mutual protection. "My God," he whispered, using an expression his people had abandoned centuries ago. "What have we been doing?" The question wasn't directed at Zara, but at the fundamental assumptions that had guided hegemony policy for generations. As he watched Echo's patterns respond to his emotional state, Corthane began to understand that their approach to galactic management hadn't been creating order. It had been preventing the natural connections that made true civilization possible. "Captain," Zara said gently, "would you like to experience direct contact with Echo?" Corthane's conditioning screamed warnings about biological contamination, protocol violations, and administrative consequences. But the part of him that had been awakened by Echo's presence, the part that had always existed but had never been allowed to function, wanted nothing more than to touch this creature that had somehow become precious to him in a matter of minutes. "Yes," he said simply. The facility's systems modified Echo's containment unit, creating an interface that allowed safe physical contact while maintaining the creature's environmental needs. When Echo's appendage touched Corthane's hand, the captain experienced something that redefined his understanding of consciousness itself. The bond was instant, profound, and completely voluntary on both sides. Echo offered connection. Corthane chose to accept it. In that moment, he understood that every policy the hegemony had developed to prevent such bonding had been based on fear of losing control, fear of emotional vulnerability, fear of caring about beings they might someday have to fight or sacrifice. But the bond didn't make him weaker. It made him more than he had ever been alone. "Dr. Khan," he said, his voice carrying new harmonics that his species only produced in moments of profound meaning. "This changes everything." "It doesn't have to change everything, Captain." "Captain, it can simply add to everything." The hegemony systems could work better, not worse, if they incorporated emotional bonding rather than suppressing it. Through his connection with Echo, Corthane could sense the presence of his crew aboard their ship. The empathic transmission had awakened their suppressed bonding capacity, and they were forming connections not just with each other, but with the very concept of caring for beings unlike themselves. "My crew will never be the same," he realized. "No," Zara agreed. "They'll be better. They'll be what your species was meant to be before the conditioning." Corthane looked at Echo, whose patterns had shifted to what he somehow knew represented deep contentment. "And this creature ... Echo, it seeks to create these bonds. Echo seeks to nurture the bonds that already exist in potential. Humans have a saying, you can't love someone into loving you back. Emotional bonds can't be forced. They can only be invited and welcomed." The implications were staggering. Instead of managing the galaxy through administrative control and threat of force, they could build a civilization based on voluntary emotional connections between species. The diversity that the hegemony had always seen as a management problem could become the foundation for a richer, more resilient interspecies community. "Dr. Khan," Corthane said, making perhaps the most momentous decision in hegemony history, "I am formally requesting asylum for myself and my crew. We cannot return to hegemony space as we were, but more importantly, we cannot participate in policies designed to prevent what we now know to be the highest achievement of consciousness, the choice to care for beings unlike ourselves." Echo's response was a burst of bioluminescent joy that filled the facility with warm, welcoming light. Through their bond, Corthane felt the creature's absolute delight at the expansion of their family group. "Welcome home, Captain," Zara said, and Corthane realized that for the first time in his life, he understood what home actually meant. The transformation of the asteroid facility began immediately, as its adaptive systems recognized the presence of new family members and began creating spaces suitable for hegemony, physiology, and social needs. But their moment of triumph was interrupted by new alerts from the facility's long-range sensors. "Dr. Khan, the installation's I announced," We are detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching this system. Hegemony Command appears to have dispatched a full enforcement fleet. Captain Corthane's expression shifted from wonder to grim determination. Admiral Zaris, he said, my failure to report in would have triggered automatic escalation protocols. She'll be coming with enough firepower to sterilize this entire asteroid field. Zara felt a chill of fear. But when she looked at Echo, her companion's patterns showed not alarm, but something that looked remarkably like anticipation. What is it, Echo? What are you thinking? The creature's response came through the facility's translation matrix. More bonds possible. Fear creates opportunity for connection. Captain, Zara said, understanding beginning to dawn. How many? Ships in a hegemony enforcement fleet? 12 battle cruisers, 47 support vessels, approximately 30,000 personnel. Corthane paused, realizing the implications, all of whom have the same suppressed bonding capacity that my crew experienced. The facility's AI joined the conversation. The installation's empathy amplifiers can be reconfigured to broadcast across a much wider range. However, such a transmission would require enormous energy expenditure and precise coordination between multiple consciousness types. You're talking about awakening an entire fleet, Zara said. 30,000 beings simultaneously, experiencing emotional bonding for the first time in their lives. Echo's patterns pulsed with absolute certainty. Ready? Time to grow family. Admiral Zaris of the Hegemony Enforcement Division materialized in the command center of the Dreadnought. Final authority, with the cold efficiency that had made her the youngest admiral in hegemony history. Her species had been among the first to embrace the emotional conditioning protocols, trading individual feelings for collective strategic thinking. The result was a mind capable of managing galactic-scale military operations without being hindered by concerns for individual casualties or moral complications. Status report, she commanded, her voice carrying the absolute authority of someone who had never questioned an order or decision. Fleet deployment complete, Admiral, her tactical coordinator responded. All vessels report ready for sterilization bombardment. Target asteroid shows no signs of defensive capabilities. And Captain, Corthane's vessel? The Dominance Absolute remains in close proximity to the target. No response to our hails. Zaris analyzed the tactical situation with mechanical precision. Either Corthane was dead, compromised, or had encountered something that exceeded his ability to handle. In any case, the solution was the same: complete elimination of the biological threat and any contaminated personnel. Begin charging primary bombardment arrays. All vessels are to target the asteroid simultaneously. I want nothing left larger than dust particles. Inside the facility, Zara Khan stood at the center of a technological miracle that represented the highest achievement of 3 different forms of consciousness working in perfect harmony. The asteroid's empathy amplifiers had been reconfigured into something unprecedented, a broadcasting system capable of transmitting authentic emotional experience across vast distances with enough precision to affect thousands of minds simultaneously. Energy requirements are massive, the facility AI reported. We will need to channel power from both the installation's core systems and the Dominance Absolute's engines. Captain Corthane, now serving as liaison between the facility and his former ship, coordinated the power transfer with a competence that impressed Zara. My crew has already begun the modifications. Dr. Khan, you should know that they're volunteering for this, despite understanding it will likely result in their court-martial if we fail. They're not just risking court-martial, Zara realized. If Admiral Zaris follows standard protocol, she'll classify them as contaminated and target them along with us. Echo's patterns shifted to deep determination, mixed with protective fury. The creature had bonded not just with Zara and Corthane, but with every crew member who had experienced emotional awakening. To Echo's perception, they were all family now, and family protected each other regardless of the odds. Echo wants to know if you're ready, Zara translated. This is going to be the largest empathy transmission ever attempted. 30,000 minds experiencing bonding for the first time simultaneously. The psychological shock could be overwhelming, Corthane warned. My people have been conditioned for generations to suppress these feelings. Sudden exposure might cause behavioral collapse. Or, Zara said, watching Echo's patterns pulse with confidence. It might cause behavioral revolution. Sometimes the things we're most afraid of are the things we need most desperately. The facility's sensors detected the hegemony fleet's weapons coming online, massive energies building toward a coordinated bombardment that would eliminate them in seconds. Dr. Khan, Admiral Xeris's voice came through the communication array. You have 30 seconds to surrender the biological contaminant and any compromised personnel. Failure to comply will result in immediate sterilization. Zara looked at Echo, whose entire being seemed focused on the moment ahead. Are you sure about this? The creature's response was absolute. Family grows. Fear becomes love. Show them. Admiral Xeris, Zara replied. We're transmitting our surrender. Full data package incoming. But instead of surrender terms, the transmission contains something far more dangerous to the hegemony systems of control. The pure, undiluted experience of unconditional love between different species. Not just the memory or concept of bonding, but the actual emotional reality, the feeling of caring more about another being's welfare than your own. The joy of connection across impossible differences. The strength that comes from choosing to trust and be trusted. The effect on the hegemony fleet was immediate and unprecedented. Across 12 battle cruisers and 47 support vessels, beings who had never been allowed to experience authentic emotional connection suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by feelings they had no framework to understand. Admiral Xeris, standing at the center of the Final Authority's command center, felt her carefully maintained emotional barriers shatter like glass. For the first time in her adult life, she experienced wonder, compassion, and the devastating recognition of what she had lost by accepting conditioning that removed her capacity for love. Throughout the fleet, similar transformations were occurring. Weapons officers found themselves unable to target the asteroid because they could suddenly perceive the precious lives it contained. Tactical coordinators abandoned their stations to seek physical comfort from crew members they had never seen. As more than operational units, engineering teams began working together, not because of orders, but because they discovered they genuinely cared about each other's success and safety. Admiral Xeris's voice broke over the communication channel. What have you done to us? We've shown you what you were before the conditioning, Zara replied gently. We've shown you what it feels like to choose love instead of fear. Through the facility's sensors, they could watch as the massive hegemony fleet gradually powered down its weapons, not because of orders or tactical considerations, but because 30,000 beings had simultaneously rediscovered their capacity for empathy and found it impossible to destroy. What they now recognized as family. Echo's patterns had become a symphony of pure joy, broadcasting happiness and welcome to every awakened consciousness in the fleet. Through the facility's translation systems, the creature's message reached every ship. Welcome home. Safe now. Family grows stronger. Admiral, Zara continued, you're experiencing what every species in the galaxy knows naturally. The ability to form bonds across biological boundaries. The hegemony has spent centuries trying to manage diversity through control and separation. But what if there was another way? What if we could build a civilization based on chosen connections rather than imposed hierarchies? The response, when it came, was from Admiral Xeris herself, but her voice carried harmonics and emotional resonances that hegemony conditioning had suppressed for generations. Dr. Khan, my entire fleet we're all experiencing something I don't have words for. My crew is abandoning their posts, but not out of negligence. They're seeking each other out, offering comfort, expressing concern for beings they've never met. And I can't stop thinking about how many worlds we've sterilized in the name of biological security, how many connections we've prevented, how many families we've destroyed. Through Echo, Zara could sense the emotional awakening rippling through the entire fleet. 30,000 beings discovering that they had the capacity to love, to care, to choose connection over control. Admiral, you can't undo the past, but you can choose what to do next. Echo and beings like it don't seek to replace the hegemony systems. They want to help those systems remember their original purpose, protecting and nurturing life throughout the galaxy. The silence that followed lasted for several minutes. When Admiral Xeris spoke again, her words carried the weight of a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. Dr. Khan, I am hereby suspending Operation Biological Sterilization and requesting immediate asylum for my entire fleet. We cannot return to hegemony space as we were, and we cannot continue to participate in policies designed to prevent what we now know to be the highest expression of consciousness. Echo's response was a cascade of bioluminescent celebration that the asteroid facility amplified and broadcast to every ship in the fleet. Across 30,000 vessels, beings who had rediscovered their capacity for love felt welcomed into a family that spanned the stars. The revolution had begun not with weapons or manifestos, but with the simple recognition that the choice to care for others, regardless of species, origin, or difference, was the foundation of true civilization. Captain Corthane, watching the impossible transformation of an entire military fleet into something resembling a massive family reunion, turned to Zara with something that could only be called awe. Dr. Khan... What happens now? Zara looked at Echo, whose patterns had shifted to something she had never seen before. Deep contentment mixed with excited anticipation for the future. Now, she said, smiling, now we build something better together. 6 months later, the sanctuary network had grown beyond anything Zara Khan could have imagined when she first chose to save one small creature from bureaucratic destruction. What had begun as a desperate escape from a doomed research station had evolved into a movement that was quietly revolutionizing interspecies relationships across the galaxy. The asteroid facility, now designated Haven Prime, served as the central hub for 47 similar installations, each one built around the principles that Echo's species had perfected: voluntary bonding, mutual care, and the recognition that diversity was strength rather than a management problem. Admiral Xeris, now director of the Haven Defense Coalition, stood in the facility's expanded command center, reviewing reports that would have been impossible under the old hegemony paradigms. Instead of suppression statistics and compliance ratings, her displays showed bonding success rates, quality of life improvements, and the remarkable efficiency gains that occurred when different species worked together by choice rather than coercion. The Centauri system installation is reporting first contact with a silicon-based collective consciousness. She informed Zara. Preliminary bonding attempts are showing remarkable promise. And the hegemony's response? Zara asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The same as always. They've classified the Silicon Collective as a Category 5 threat and are mobilizing a sterilization fleet. Zaris paused, her expression showing the sadness that came with understanding what they had lost during their centuries of emotional conditioning. 3 years ago, I would have been leading that fleet. Echo, now living freely throughout the facility, rather than in any form of containment, moved between the various beings who had become its extended family. The creature had grown not just in size, but in complexity. Its bonding abilities had developed to accommodate dozens of different species simultaneously, creating a network of emotional connections that strengthened everyone involved. Captain Corthane approached, carrying reports from the latest rescued hegemony vessel. The pattern had become familiar. Hegemony forces arrived to neutralize biological threats, encountered the reality of interspecies bonding, and within hours were requesting asylum rather than continuing their missions of destruction. The cruiser administrative efficiency has completed its transition, he reported. Crew of 800, all requesting inclusion in the Haven network. They've also brought intelligence about a hegemony research facility that's apparently developed artificial bonding suppressors technology designed to prevent the kind of emotional awakening we've been facilitating. Zara felt a familiar surge of protective determination. The hegemony's response to losing control had been to double down on suppression, developing increasingly sophisticated methods to prevent their people from experiencing natural emotional connections. They're afraid, she realized. They know that once their people experience real bonding, they'll never accept the old systems again. Echo's patterns shifted to what Zara had learned, indicated strategic thinking. The creature moved to the facility's communication array and began broadcasting on frequencies that reached every installation in the Haven network. What is it, Echo? The response came through their shared bond, rather than the facility's translation systems. Time to show them all. No more fear, no more hiding. Family includes everyone. Zara understood. For 6 months, they had been reactive, rescuing individuals in small groups, while the hegemony developed more sophisticated suppression technologies. But Echo was proposing something far more ambitious, a simultaneous, galaxy-wide demonstration of what interspecies bonding could accomplish. "You want to reach every hegemony world at once," she said. Echo's confirmation was absolute. The creature had been growing its network, not just among the Haven installations, but through every being who had experienced bonding. Former hegemony personnel had returned to their home worlds, carrying the capacity for emotional connection, and many had found ways to share that capacity with others, despite official suppression efforts. "The network is larger than we realized," Admiral Xeris said, studying data that Echo was sharing through the facility systems. "We have bonding connections reaching into every major hegemony system. Not enough to overcome the suppression technology, but enough to serve as focal points for a massive empathy transmission. Like what we did with your fleet, but on a galactic scale," Corthane added, simultaneously awakening the bonding capacity of billions of beings. The technical challenges were staggering, but as Zara watched Echo coordinate with the facilities, AI, and the growing network of bonded beings across dozens of species, she realized they weren't just planning a transmission, they were planning the birth of a new form of civilization. "Echo," she said, "are you sure about this? Once we do this, there's no going back. The hegemony will either transform completely, or they'll try to destroy everything we've built." The creature's response carried the absolute certainty that came from understanding something at the deepest level. Fear ends when love begins. Time to choose love. Over the following weeks, the Haven Network coordinated the most ambitious empathy transmission in galactic history. Using Echo species as living amplifiers, the network of sanctuary installations, converted hegemony vessels, and bonded beings throughout the galaxy prepared to broadcast a single message: the experience of choosing to care for others regardless of species, origin, or difference. On the designated day, as the transmission began, Zara stood beside Echo in Haven Prime's central chamber, watching as display screens showed the response from across the galaxy. On world after world, beings who had never been allowed to experience authentic emotional connection suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by feelings that their societies had spent centuries suppressing. The results exceeded even Echo's optimistic projections. Instead of chaos or system collapse, the galaxy experienced something unprecedented: a simultaneous recognition of the bonds that already existed in potential between all conscious beings. Fear-based hierarchies began dissolving as beings discovered they could work together more effectively through voluntary cooperation than through imposed control. The hegemony's response was swift and predictable. They activated their new suppression technology on maximum power, trying to force their people back into emotional conditioning. But the technology had a fatal flaw. It could suppress individual bonding capacity, but it couldn't overcome the network effect of billions of beings choosing connections simultaneously. Admiral Xeris watched the tactical displays with amazement as hegemony enforcement fleets throughout the galaxy simply stopped, not because they had been defeated or disabled, but because their crews were experiencing something more powerful than any technology: the recognition that the beings they had been ordered to fight were family. "It's working," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "They're choosing connection over control." Echo's patterns had become a constant celebration of joy, broadcasting welcome and acceptance to every newly awakened consciousness across the galaxy. Through their bond, Zara could feel the creature's deep satisfaction, not at victory over an enemy, but at the expansion of family to include everyone. The transformation wasn't complete. It would take time for new systems to develop, for beings to learn how to govern through voluntary cooperation rather than imposed hierarchy. But the foundation had been laid for something unprecedented in galactic history: a civilization based on chosen bonds, rather than enforced compliance. As reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy, former hegemony worlds requesting aid in developing new governmental systems, previously isolated species seeking inclusion in the Haven network, the emergence of art and culture celebrating interspecies bonding. Zara realized that her simple decision to save one small creature had grown into something that would reshape the galaxy forever. "Echo," she said, Placing her hand against her companion's warm, shifting surface, "I think we did. We showed them what family really means." The creature's response was pure contentment. Family grows, always grows, never ends. Outside Haven, Prime's observation windows, the stars seemed brighter somehow, as if the galaxy itself was celebrating the recognition that every conscious being was part of the same vast, interconnected family. The age of fear-based control was ending, replaced by something far more powerful, a simple choice to care for each other across any difference. Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy hadn't been technology or military prowess. It had been the willingness to adopt any creature as family, and the recognition that love, not fear, was the foundation of true civilization. The revolution was complete, and it had been won not with weapons, but with the most powerful force in the universe, the choice to care.